Good evening and welcome to another edition of Resource PNG. In our last episode, we brought to light the government's decision to restructure Petra Mean PNG Holdings. We continue discussion on the topic in an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister, who answers some tough questions placed by our Resource PNG viewers. The Prime Minister, Honourable Peter ONeill, explains his role as trustee of the Kumal Trust shareholding, his views of IPBC, and his role having veto power. But that's not all on the show. We also get the Prime Minister's take on BHP Bulletin, the mining tax review, and whether PNG has seen the end of the mining boom, and a lot more.
It's my privilege to have with me today the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, the Honourable Peter ONeill. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on the show today.
Is it possible to be Prime Minister and run the entire country, as well as the three Kumal corporations, sir?
Well, running the country is my mandated responsibility, and I have been given that responsibility by Parliament, and I will certainly, and I hope I am doing the best I can in discharging that responsibility. Running of the proposed companies is not my responsibility. It is going to be managed by independent managers, independent board members. I will just be a trustee. It is very similar to the current structure that we have in Petra Mean. Petra Mean, I am the trustee shareholder on behalf of the country in that particular organization. The board and the management of Petra Mean run that company. All we are trying to do with those three Kumal entities is basically we are trying to streamline the assets so that the petroleum assets and the gas assets are not all over the place. Right now we have the assets parked in IPBC, we have assets parked in Treasury, we have assets parked in Petra Mean itself. So they are virtually all over the place. We are not taking advantage of the value of those assets on behalf of the country. We are not building up any skills. We are not building up any experience where our citizens can learn to handle these industries. These are very technically involved industries, and we need special skills to run them. We cannot kid ourselves and continue to think that we can run it on a part-time basis. And that is why this government is taking this approach of setting up the three different trusts so that all the assets in the country are held by, certain industries are held by each individual companies.
Why did you start up the three Kumal entities, and were you really dissatisfied with IPBC?
So IPBC was started without much debate. The public was not given the opportunity like we are doing now. We have announced to the nation that we are going to set up these three companies that will all the investments and assets of Papua New Guinean citizens and the government. When they set up IPBC, there was no debate. They just woke up one morning, took the bill to Parliament and then established IPBC. Now we are seeing the weaknesses in IPBC. IPBC is another layer of structure where, I'll give you an example. If a board of Air New Guinea decides that they would like to lease a plane or they would like to negotiate a purchase of a new plane, they have to go and seek permission from the board of IPBC before they make their decision, even after the board of Air New Guinea has already agreed to do so. So there is continuous duplication of decision-making process. That's the first particular responsibility issue that we have in contention. The second one is that, very simply, is that IPBC it was created to establish policy guidelines for the management of all the state-owned entities. It is not set up to run institutions. That is why when they are trying to run projects and things, we are not getting the traction that we are supposed to be getting. So all in all, the performance so far of IPBC in managing the affairs of the state has not produced better dividends, it has not produced better returns for the state, and it has certainly not produced or skilled more Papua New Guineans that are able to take up many of these challenges. That is why it is important, rather than having 3 or 4 companies competing for the same thing and doing the same thing, we must now set up companies that specialize. We must have specialist petroleum and gas company. We must have specialist mining companies, and we must have specialist investment companies. Now, these are 3 companies that will require skills. We need to recruit the best skills to run those companies. We cannot just have people on an ad hoc basis. When governments change, we replace them with people who have no skills whatsoever. That is why they are not performing. This has been happening for the last 37 years. So it is time that we make sure that we establish structures that will deliver to the expectations of our people.
So the management for those companies won't be political appointments?
Certainly not. Certainly not. I'm the first to admit that politicians are not trained to be petroleum engineers or mining engineers for that matter. People who are skilled in those. That's what we have been lacking. Right now we've got politicians and we've got ex-politicians and we've got some political supporter and my bus driver and everybody trying to run these things. So
Thank you,
the reality is obvious. Let's face it.
That's right. Now, the Kumal Trust will feature previous Prime Ministers as shareholders and yourself as trustees, having veto power in this role. You say this new structure will remove inefficiencies, but our viewers have expressed concern over what kind of fiscal management safeguards there will be in place. Exactly how will you ensure transparency and accountability in your role?
What we are trying to do is the trustee will have an overall oversight of the three different companies that we are setting up. Now, when we have a oversight, meaning that these boards and the management must provide quarterly or monthly reports to the trustees so that they are monitoring the performance of this organization. We don't want to go there 10 years later and find that it's not working. We must make sure that management decisions and board decisions are monitored so that it is in the best interest of that organization. We cannot afford to have a situation where these organizations are taken advantage commercially by people with vested interests. And that is why we thought, who better than to have former prime ministers, who we all have trusted to hold this position. Papua New Guineans have trusted them to hold the position of prime minister at a certain time. And they are held in high regard by many of our citizens. And they do have duty of care for the nation. They are the best people that is placed now that we all can relate to. And they don't come from one political party. They come from a range of political parties. And they don't necessarily agree with each other either, So they have the standing to making sure that they do the right thing for the country. And I'm very certain it is a worthwhile proposition to have them as trustees. They are not paid executives of the businesses. They are not getting extra wages for this. They are all in this responsibility to have an oversight of the investments for and on behalf of our country and our people. So I think it is important to understand that when we establish this particular structure, we are also putting it by law. So the accountability process is that every year, at the first sitting of Parliament after the financial year finishes, there must be a report table on the floor of Parliament to tell us where those companies, how they performed in that year. So the trustees must place it on the floor of Parliament through the Prime Minister. Now, why the Prime Minister has got a veto in power is that it must work in line with government policy. The Prime Minister of the day has been elected by the people to implement their policies. Now, we don't want to have structures of businesses operating outside what the government's policy is. Otherwise, you have confusion. So there must be some alignment on how these businesses are run to the wishes of our people through the elected leaders, and that is why there's a veto in power. But I don't think veto in powers will be exercised only for extreme circumstances. But these veto in powers will be clearly defined by law. So the entire country will know when the Prime Minister, especially the serving Prime Minister, can exercise those powers.
We'll be back with more of Prime Minister Honourable Peter O'Neill's interview when we return. In this segment, the Prime Minister answers why state equity for mineral and petroleum assets aren't placed directly in the state's trust. Honourable Peter ONeill also talks about what the role of the Ministry of State Enterprises will be once the Kumal entities are set up.
Prime Ministers aren't necessarily experienced equity holders, and it does raise a lot of questions. Why not just have the shares directly in the state's hands?
Because our current law and our legislative structure does not allow that. State is not seen as a entity where it can hold shares directly under the name of state or the independent state of Papua New Guinea. That is why we have all our investments now. We have got trustee arrangements where either the Minister for Finance is a trustee shareholder on behalf of the country and the government, or the Minister for Treasury is a trustee shareholder. So that's how it has been done for many, many years. So our legislative structure does not allow the states to all state as an independent state of Papua New Guinea to hold any shares directly, because when you start holding shares in companies, you can be sued as a entity under the Companies Act. So to avoid that and avoid all the inconveniences of owning shares, we have a trustee arrangement. So it is nothing new. We've been doing this for 37 years. So as Prime Minister, I will be holding shares on behalf of the government and the people of Papua New Guinea. Now, this automatically finishes when I'm voted out of the office. So the next Prime Minister automatically, by law, holds the shares in trust. So it's transferred without any difficulty. So when I retire I'm not taking it with me to Pangaea, and I'll hold it up there and tell everybody you can come and get it in Pangaea. By law it automatically transfers. So let us have some reality to this.
Right. Thank you, sir. How will the role of the Ministry of State Enterprises change?
Well, the Minister of State Enterprises has got a huge responsibility. He is in charge of all our investments in the country. Those investments will continue to exist. His role will be, in fact, more defined, so that he has got an overall carriage of policy issues managing the state-owned enterprises throughout the country. He will be focusing on transparency and accountability issues in regard to the management of the state-owned enterprises. So I think you will find that he will be a little bit more active in those issues as we move forward.
Right, thank you. Now, there's been recent reports on a website that the PNG government aims to take over PNG SDP, which is a Singapore-based company and a Singapore-registered company. Is that legally possible?
I don't think government has ever stated that we are trying to take over the management of PNG Sustainable Development Program. I think, I don't subscribe to websites, and I don't subscribe to social media that is largely based on gossip and hearsay. And we are all aware that there are a few individuals scouting the web pages and web services and social media services who are our political opponents, and who are deliberately putting out lies, untruth statements to try and excite people. Now, I don't get excited that easily, so it doesn't bother me one bit, but I want to stress this very easily. We are not in the business of trying to run sustainable development program. Ours is in the business of trying to get the right benefits for our people. Our people meaning the people of Papua New Guinea, people of Western Province, and generally the government as a whole. Now, we have an obligation to our nation, and for that I don't apologize to anyone, and I will make no apology to our partners in ONeill. ONeill's lease has expired. PNG Sustainable and PNG government are shareholders of ONeill. ONeill's mining lease for that area in which they operate has expired. We have given them a temporary lease extension, which will go up to 31st December 2013. 1st of January 2014, a new lease will be issued. And we are going to issue that lease to a company that is reflective, very reflective of the ownership for the people of Papua New Guinea. At present, the sustainable arrangement is not reflecting true ownership and benefits to Papua New Guinea. That is why we are doing it. And at the same time, this is just a cover-up, a huge cover-up that has been structured legally and endorsed by our parliament many years back to dismiss the environmental damage that was done along the Fly River area. Now, all you need to do is go down to the Fly River and parts of Western Province to see the damage that they have done. What do I say to our people in Western Province? I said, that's okay, let's ignore it. That is not how I want to run our country. We must respond, even though if there's 1 or 2 people in that community. We are here to represent their interests. They cannot go out there and tell the world that this is happening at our backyard. Now, we have an obligation to these people. If it's the last thing I will do is to make sure that they are well looked after, they benefit fully and well from this project that we are now embarking on. And I think our people who are in the social media and networking should realize that they need to be constructive in how they want to debate for the benefit of rest of Papua New Guineans who have no access to social media and who have no access to information that they have. Some of these are supposed to be intelligent people knowing the history of the issues before us, before we have a debate on how we can participate and whether we can have ownership of ONeill or not. But ONeill mine will be managed by a fully 100% owned Papua New Guinean company on 1st of January 2014. We will work that through Parliament, and we will work that through our Mining Act, which is the lease arrangements that we'll get. All the government agencies have been notified. We are now working towards it. In terms of management of ONeill, we are already engaged in talks with prospective managers and the current management. We will continue to engage their expertise. And as I've stated publicly before, the last thing that any government wants to do is go out there and run a mine. We have no experience in that. But we don't have to have experience in mining to own a mine. We can hire expertise, as we are doing now. PNG Sustainable and the people who are running PNG Sustainable have no experience. In fact, 0 experience in running a mine. But they want to continue owning almost 70% of that mine. For what? For whose benefit? The small water projects and small buying canoe up and down, it doesn't fix our people's problem. That's just a camouflage to try and win the mindset of our people with some lolly, So I'm not in that business. I'm in the business of making sure our country, our people benefit what is truly theirs.
After the break, we'll have more of the interview with the Prime Minister of PNG. Thank you for staying with us on Resource PNG. We continue with an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Honourable Petra ONeill.
So with the change of the ownership of the ONeill mine in 2014, how can you assure the current management that their jobs will be intact?
The management of ONeill manages our own contract. Nobody is going to terminate their contracts. They will serve their contracts, and I'm certain that the senior management, managing director and all the other senior managers who have been there for quite some time, their indications to government is that they wish to continue. They wish to continue under the new arrangements, and we will accept that. And our job is to train Papua New Guineans to take over those jobs. The sooner Papua New Guineans take management responsibilities over their own mines, the better it is. We don't want Papua New Guineans going and working in Australia, who are now down there serving the Australian interests. We want them to work here. We want them to train our own people. That is why we are going into owning this mine. This is not the first time any country in the world has been owning mines. So it's been done before. So I don't know what the fuss is all about. Stop underestimating yourself. Papua New Guineans have to have some pride in themselves that they can meet the challenges. We cannot just depend on others to come and do everything for us. We are not a lazy country. We are a bright country, intelligent country. Our people are very smart. They will do it. If it means the first day of January, if I have to go and drive a truck myself, I will. So, come on.
Hear, hear. Now, members of the public have expressed views where they say they don't understand why the government's upset with BHP Billiton regarding not receiving any dividends from ONeill or PNG SDP. What do you have to say to that?
BHP has never paid us any dividend. We don't need their dividend. As BHP, we are not the shareholders of BHP, so I have no interest in BHP. My interest is in ONeill. ONeill must be able to run for the interest of our country. ONeill has been able to fund the budgets of our country. That must continue. We have an opportunity to correct the mistakes of the past. All those people who are wanting to know what has happened, please get on a plane, go down to Darul, get on a boat, go up to Tabubil, then you will know what we are talking about. Don't sit in some office somewhere and think that you know what's going around the world and make judgments on people. I travel the country. I see what the suffering is. I don't need to be told by people that everything is okay, so let's just allow things to be the same. People on the ground in ONeill, people on the ground in the Western Province wanted change. And this is what we are doing it for them.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now, we understand that your government is carrying out a tax review of the resource sector with the IMF. Is it your view that mining and oil companies will pay more tax?
Not necessarily pay more tax, but we want to see, in comparison with the rest of the world, in the similar industries, how rest of the countries and around the world are taking benefits, how they are structuring their benefits. I'll give you a good example. Our studies indicate that Norway, for instance, taxes up to 70% of taxes in mining and oil and gas sector. 70%. Of course, all our mining companies and all the oil companies complained for the last 30 years. But they have never left Norway, They're still there, still operating, making money. They complain every day, but they've never left. So, what is all the fuss about? We are trying to be at par with what is happening around the world, so our people can get the maximum possible benefit for their resource. And I think any sensible investor will understand where we're coming from. They understand it very well. It seems that our few sections of our own community don't want to understand. BHP is not here trying to do PNG a favor. Get that out of your mind. They're not here doing us a favor. They're here to make money. Our job is to make money for our country, our people, our landowners, our communities. And that is why we're pushing. So let's work together. We have an opportunity. If we renew the mining lease now under the current terms, this dream of PNG being financially independent is over. If we are ever going to be truly financially independent in this country, this is the time. This is the moment. In 20 or 30 years' time, history will judge us whether we are doing the right thing for the country or not. I can assure you that history will judge us fairly.
More to come on the show. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Resource PNG. If you've just joined, so far on the show we've featured an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Honourable Petra Mean, where he's discussed the reason of his appointed role as the trustee of the Kumal Trust shareholding, what is to become of the Ministry of State Enterprises once the Kumal entities are formed, PNG Sustainable Development Programme and Petra Mining Limited. In this final part of the Prime Minister's interview, Honourable Petra Mean talks about the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI, and the state of PNG's current resource boom, given that the Freda River project and Yandera appear to have been stalled.
The Treasury Minister spoke recently of complying to the EITI framework. Do you support that initiative?
The Extractive Industries Transparency Initiatives, as EITI stands for, is that it's a proposition made by a few European countries on how we could manage and account for some of the revenues that we are collecting from those extractive industries, like mining, for instance. We welcome those initiatives and we support them, but we need to assess the details of those initiatives, and I am not privy to it, but Treasurer has got the carriage over it. He has had detailed discussions with many of those officials. But as government, we need to take a position on it. But again, it must be for the interest of our country. We cannot continue to subscribe to things just because people think that it's a good idea. Let me say about this EITI issue. One has to realize that those countries who are proposing this, they themselves have not signed up to it. They are proposing that we, some developing country in the middle of Africa or somewhere in the Pacific or Asia, because they don't trust us, that you should sign up. But they themselves don't want to sign. So we have to question why. It's a question that we need to ask. Why do we have to subscribe to these kind of initiatives when they themselves are not able to do so? We have done some of the things that will safeguard some of our investment, including the sovereign wealth fund that we are establishing. But we are not doing the sovereign wealth fund for the LNG project only, or one single project. We are doing it for the entire government investment program. I say this, like, if Air Niugini makes a profit, when they declare dividend, some percentage of that will go to sovereign wealth fund for our future generation. If PNG Power makes a profit, same thing will happen. If Octedi makes a profit, same thing will happen. Our future generation must know that we are not consuming and consuming and consuming today. We have made some savings for them for the future. And that's how we are structured. That's most unique, unlike many other places in the world. Many places in the world. I'll give you an example in Australia. They've got a sovereign wealth fund called Future Fund. They do not have mining companies contributing to that fund. They do not. They only have Telstra. When they sold Telstra, they put the Telstra sales money into the fund. That's the only money that they've got in the fund, or whatever surplus that the government puts and parks it in there. So we are doing something different that many other countries have in the world. So we must be given credit for some positive things that we are doing, rather than thinking that we're running some backward country in the middle of somewhere. We are running a country that is vibrant, that is going places, that will be something. We are on the right path now, so let's work together.
A number of large projects such as Freda River and Yandera appear to have been stalled. Do you think we've seen the end of the resources boom?
I don't think so, because the demand for resources all around the world is still very high. And the commodity prices around the world indicate to us that there is an increased level of opportunity out there for resource investors to come and invest. In the case of Freda and Yandera, I understand Maringo has got some, they're a small company. They're not a large capitalized based company. They will need partners to come in and develop that. Whereas Freda, it's been bought off by a very big merchant banker called Glencore. And their core role is not mining. So that is why they're not really interested in going up and starting new mines around the world. whereas they are only trying to keep what is now operational. So what they call the green fields, which is a new mines around the world, they are now parking those projects. So Frida, although it has gone through a feed stage, it is now been reconsidered whether they will continue or not. But our opportunity is there will be others who will come and buy that resource out. It is a world-class resource. In fact, it will be among one of the top 5 or 10 resource projects developed in the world. So people are interested. So all we need to do is get our own in-house issues resolved, like OCTEDI and others. OCTEDI can farm into it, so there are potential opportunities there for us. So the boom is not over.
Lots of potential yet to go.
Precisely.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, the Honourable Petra Mean.
That was the end of the exclusive interview with the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Honourable Petra Mean. After the break, we join Dr. Ilatemu. We now join Dr. Ilatemu, President of the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, and hear his views on the Petra Mean PNG Holdings restructure. Dr. Temu, thank you for joining us on the show. Dr. Temu, from your point of view, has Petra Mean performed the role that was expected of it, and what went wrong?
I'm of the view that Petra Mean did perform its role in terms of the scope by which it was established. I think the issues arise from more an operational point of view, and if an equity opportunity arises that then creates a cash flow for the entity, it is that cash flow that will support the activity of the organization. And in the case of Petra Mean, the assets that it acquired at that time, the early stages, for example, Tolokuma, did not generate the cash flow that Petra Mean required to further its activity. Without this kind of cash flow, we can't expect an organization like that to fully function. So I think the objective needs to be that, setting up a structure that creates the entity that acts on behalf of the state. That's the easy part. I think the harder part is the operational part, where we need to allow this entity to operate full commercial operations so that it can fund its activity. And this means allowing it to have access to the assets that can generate the cash flow to fund its activity. In the case of Petra Mean, I don't think that was given, especially through some of the oil and gas opportunities. On the mining side, I think they had Tolokuma, which was a difficult mine at that stage, and still is a very difficult mine and has not generated the level of cash flow that could have supported Petra Mean. So in the absence of that kind of cash flow, I think it's very hard for an entity like that to operate. So the driver has to be, allowing this entity to take out the equity on behalf of the state, but also allowing it to retain the cash flow that's generated by this equity so that it can fund its activities. And then the last point is the question of exploration, whether this entity should engage directly in exploration or not. In my view, they have an option to take up at the end of the exploration program. So why risk funds to go out and take out equity upfront when you have an option at the back that kicks in once the resource is proven? So I think we need to stick to that option, where we only take up equity after the development opportunity arises.
Dr. Temu, do you think Petra Mean was managed well on behalf of the nation?
That's a question, I guess, for history to decide whether it was done well. I guess my perspective is that they may not have been given the full opportunity to function, especially in terms of the issue of cash flow. I think that's where, I mean, you set up an entity, then you don't support its operations in terms of its activities. If Petra Mean had the assets, for example, it could go out and borrow commercially to raise the funds to do any future acquisitions. So that's the kind of environment in which it should have operated. I think not allowing it the full benefit of a commercial operation has impacted its ability to stay afloat over time.
More from Dr. Temu after the break. Welcome back. In this segment, we hear Dr. Ila Temu's views on the Prime Minister's recent statements regarding PNG SDP and OTML. Dr. Temu, do you think the separation of mineral and petroleum assets is a good thing? And what are the possible tangible developments that you see, as well as the foreseeable problems with this new structure?
My view is that separation is a detailed issue. I think the main issue is the establishment of an entity that can be allowed to fully operate, whether it's separated as mining and petroleum. I think that's a structure issue. Either way, the key issue boils down to allowing these entities to fully function as commercial entities. In terms of state equity, I think one of the big issues is we set up these entities to fund or to acquire these assets on behalf of the state. Often the state has to go out and borrow to fund these acquisitions. I think the issue then is ability of these entities to channel cash that flows from this equity to fund development, especially, for example, through the budget. I think in many instances that flow is not clearly defined. Yes, these entities are established as independent entities. So the flow into the budget, for example, comes through declaration of dividends. So that kind of policy, that kind of structure needs to be defined upfront so that the entities can allow a flow of dividends or cash into supporting the budget. And that way the resources that are generated out of this equity can be allowed to fund development in the country. I think one of the problems is the structures that have been set up have not had a clear structure in which the cash flow back into the budget, the development budget especially, is defined so that the money can flow into the budget. I'm of the view that, Papua New Guinea has a right to use its resources to develop its country. Every other country did that during their, early stages of development. So this is our right to try and use the resources that we have to develop our country, because if that doesn't happen, then we are taking out the resources without replacement for an equivalent value on the development side. So the country is worse off if we don't use the resources to develop our infrastructure, our health, education, etc.
The new Kumal Trust will have the current serving Prime Minister as the trustee with veto power and previous Prime Ministers as shareholders. What's your view on this?
Again, I think that's a detailed, structure issue. For me, the key issue is the actual boards that will manage these entities. I think that's where the real challenge is, having qualified people that can go on these boards, that can make a contribution to these entities in terms of quality decision making, quality commercial processes, proper audit, checks and balances in terms of the expenditure and the cash flow. So I think the key issue, the trustee sits at the top and has no management control over the operation. The real control is at the board level, and I think the key challenge has to be making sure that we get proper people with appropriate qualifications on the boards who can make decisions for the benefit of the organization as well as the country as a whole. Any interference by politics, for example, can often undermine that process. So it's setting up these independent entities, letting them deliver what they need to deliver, so that at the end of the day, their performance is judged by what they can deliver. Many times, I think over the years, we've had boards that don't really function that way. They are not as independent as they say they are. So I think giving greater independence to the boards to determine operations, I think is a real plus. And if this structure can achieve that, I think that will be a good thing for the country.
Dr. Temu, on a topic outside of Petra Mean, we asked this question as part of your role as President of the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. What is your view on the Prime Minister's recent statement regarding PNG SDP and ONeill?
From what has been reported publicly, especially through the newspapers and the recent statement by the PM published in both dailies, I guess it is the prerogative of government and the Prime Minister to try and sort out this issue if he feels that there is a need to do this. My view as President of the Chamber is that the objective with which the PM is trying to address this issue of taking control of ONeill, using, I think in the statements that have been made earlier, there was reference to use of the mining lease as a basis to try and gain control over ONeill when the mining lease expires in 2014, for example. My advice to the PM would be that using the mining lease to change what happens in ONeill is not advisable, because it sends a message out to industry that says, if your mining lease expires, this is what the government could do. So I think there needs to be a lot of caution in going down that road. My advice would be taking a different route. The government has 35% shareholding in ONeill. That's a big shareholding. It can flex its muscle in terms of that shareholding. The government also has some control of PNG SDP, especially in terms of the ownership. When PNG SDP was set up, there is provision in there that it is owned by the people of Papua New Guinea. So the people of Papua New Guinea, the PM can speak on their behalf and say, this is what the people of Papua New Guinea want for PNG SDP. So, and PNG SDP has about 65%, shareholding in ONeill. So my view is there is sufficient shareholding in ONeill itself to try and come to an arrangement that will achieve the same outcome as what the PM wants. I think that is probably the better process, and at least that won't send any negative signals out there in terms of issues of nationalization, for example. It is not quite nationalization because the shareholding is still vested in the country through government and through PNG SDP. The achievement of the end result, I think, can be done through a different angle rather than in terms of a mining lease expiry and granting of a new lease to a new entity, because in my view that sends a very negative signal out there that can be of concern to investors when they are deciding to invest in PNG.
Do you think this decision is likely to affect resource sector investments in any way?
It depends on how it is done, and I guess what I'm saying is if it is done through the renewal of the lease process, for me that sends a bad signal out there. If it is done through a shareholder arrangement that can allow change of management or change of control of the mine itself, then I think that is probably a better outcome for the country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Temu, for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
That's all we have for tonight on Resource PNG. For any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check out our MTV online at www.mtv.com.pg and go to our Resource PNG page. Until another edition of Resource PNG, have a pleasant evening.